Good afternoon, sir. My name is Shan, and my group mates there. Kindly introduce yourself.
I am just Andre Mantes po.
Hello. My name is Cal
Hello.
Piamonte. You can just call me Cal.
Tel,
Yeah,
Tel, and Jess.
Cal.
Okay, great, great.
My name is Prince.
You have some.
Another group mate, his name is Jiro. Since he can hear my
Yeah,
his mic
English
is not
trouble on
working.
his end. So, yeah, I guess we can start now.
Yes. So, Sir Gordon, this interview aims to understand your experience in the Philippines, particularly on how the Filipino culture impacted your daily life and work, social experiences. We'll be asking you a series of questions related to your initial impressions, challenges, and how you adapted to the Filipino culture. If
Okay.
you have, if at any point you'd prepare not to answer or something needs clarification, feel free to ask.
Okay.
First is
Can you tell me a bit about your background and what brought you here to the Philippines?
I'm from Canada. I'm sure maybe you know that. And I left Canada many years ago, maybe 22 years ago, and I my company was moving to Mexico, and I chose not to go. So instead, I decided a total career change and went to East Asia, where I taught English for 10 years.
How long have you been living in the Philippines?
What year? 2000 and what's 12 and 2012.
so you're 12 years here now, 13 years.
Yes, 13 years.
Can you describe your first impression of Filipino culture when you arrived?
What I was pleased to find is that many Filipinos spoke English. While I lived in East Asia for 10 years, there was little English spoken, and that was in Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea.
How did those initial impressions change over time as you adapted to the culture?
Well, pretty much all for in a positive way. I found as I more and more interacted with Filipinos, I've discovered that in general they're very friendly and easygoing people and culture. And of course, that pleased me very much as well.
What aspects of Filipino culture have had the most influence on your daily life?
Actually don't have a lot of interaction with the people around, but we live in a very small section of El Nido, which is called the Fisherman's Village, which is probably the lower class of people in El Nido. But what I have learned, many of our guests come and say, "Oh, there's a lot of poor people here. Is it safe?" Assuming that more poor people are maybe more into crime. And my answer to them has always been, this is the safest, friendliest community that I have ever lived in. So I am strongly affected by the fact that lower class people does not mean crime is high.
How would you describe the role of family and community in Filipino society, and how has it impacted your experience?
Uh, I've always thought that a lower class community would be unhappy, struggling, hungry, all of these things. But this community that I live in is seems to be very content. They're not they're not malnourished. They get fed, and they need, it seemed to need very little. They have a roof over their head. They have a meal every day, and there's not much else that seems to be very important to them. The downside is that very few of them seem to be ambitious. They're I don't know if you know, but I coach about 12 of the youth of this community all around that, right? I've coached them for about 4 years now in swimming and running. So I started with them all around 11, 12 years old, and now they're all 15, 16 years old. But I don't see much ambition to get ahead, or even the older ones, ambition to make something important of themselves. And that's a little bit, I guess, of a disappointment that I see, is that they seem satisfied basic life where you make some money today to live one more day.
How do you feel about the emphasis on hospitality in Filipino culture?
They are regularly willing and ready to help if we need assistance for something. The example is usually if we have let's say if we go out of town and we come back with supplies that we bought. Sometimes we go to Puerto Princesa and we bring back a whole bunch of supplies like food, etc. And when we arrive, people around are willing and happy to help us, like to carry it into the house, kind of thing. So yeah, I would say their hospitality is greater than what I may find in other communities.
What was the most difficult adjustment you face when it comes to work culture in the Philippines?
I found employees somewhat not take the job seriously enough. In other words, there was some frustration in that on payday, we would pay them, and then maybe they wouldn't come back to work for a couple of days because they were enjoying their salary. And in my culture, you wouldn't do that. That wouldn't happen. Okay, so that's something that was quite difficult for me in the early stages because of the differences in the work ethics.
How do Filipino workplace dynamic compare to those in your home country?
Filipinos, like I said earlier, most speak some English, but a lot of times there is miscommunication. Like maybe they didn't quite understand what I meant by something, but they don't want to. Filipinos don't like to lose face, if you know what I mean. They don't want to say, sorry, I didn't understand you. Instead, they will misinterpret and do something even if it's not correct. Okay.
How did you find adapting to social gatherings and communication style in the Philippines?
People in social gatherings I'm usually at a minority, being a native English speaker. So it's awkward because in a group who are mainly Filipino, they will, of course, always prefer to speak their own language, even though I know they speak English. Even with my wife, who speaks very good English, if there's myself and my wife, and let's say one other Filipino, well, they'll even though the three of us speak good English, they will prefer to speak Tagalog because they're more comfortable with it. And sometimes that frustrates me a little because I know my wife speaks good English, and the other person, if I am with them alone, they speak good English. But if I'm a minority, in other words, if it's me with two or more other Filipinos, they will likely speak their language.
In your social life, did you face any challenges in forming connection or friendship with Filipinos?
Like I said, if the Filipino speaks English, and it's very easy to form a connection with them, because in general, Filipinos seem to be very happy to meet foreigners. When I say foreigners, I mean English speaking foreigners. I mean, foreigners are many different languages, but they always seem quite happy to meet English speaking foreigners and like myself, and it is easy to make a connection with them. They seem very open to connect, other than the fact that they're nervous about their English speaking ability.
What specific challenges did you face when trying to participate in local community activities or events where you live?
None except for the language. The hard thing is, like I guess what sort of I keep mentioning, is that it's easy to get involved with the activity, but it's just the language gap that makes it difficult.
What is your perspective on the general attitudes of Filipinos towards foreigners regarding their integration and inclusion in your community?
Filipino culture is somewhat unique, and they have their own ways, and it's a little difficult to be. I'd say it's still a bit difficult to be integrated into the Filipino culture, because your culture is in some ways quite different than other foreigners' cultures. So it's difficult for us to really understand what's going on.
What specific changes have you noticed in your daily habits or routines?
What's the word? You know the term tambay tambay?
Yes.
Okay. I've learned that skill. Like as a foreigner, it's like we have the attitude of you should be ashamed of yourself unless you are busy doing something productive all day. Okay? But maybe it's more this culture. I've learned and I've noticed a lot of times that people are just hanging out, doing nothing, and they claim they're, what are you doing today? Tambay tambay. And I go, oh, don't you feel bad? And they say, no, it's okay. Nothing to do is okay. So I've learned that skill of being okay. If I have nothing to do today, it's okay.
Tambay,
Don't
tambay.
have to be, yeah, tambay tambay. And I've often taught my foreign guests the same thing, and they tend to agree with me that our, if you want to call it, developed countries or first world countries, we are similar in that we are so obsessed with productivity that we feel we must be busy all the time. If we're not, we should feel bad about it.
Have you noticed any changes in your beliefs or values since living in the Philippines?
I am very non-superstitious myself. I believe in the real world and only what I see around me. And I don't believe in ghosts, and I don't believe in oh my goodness. I remember once young guys were taking me on a hike, and we come across on the trail a pile of dirt. And he said, "Oh, sir, don't step there, because there's some what do they call it? Supernatural force that created that pile." And I don't know, maybe you understand it, but I didn't understand. But I just I didn't step there. I respected it, but I just laughed about it and thought, "Oh, that's craziness." So no, I know that a lot of Filipinos have superstitions, like ghosts or whatever, but I don't.
How would you describe your communication style now compared to when you first arrived in the Philippines?
I was prepared for a lack of fluent English speaking because of my 10-year experience in East Asia, South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan, where English is very weak. So I was prepared for it. And so, like I said earlier, I always made a point of speaking slowly and clearly to help the person that I'm speaking to understand me. So that was a fairly easy adaptation for me. And also, as I've said earlier, is I was impressed that there was so much more English spoken than in my previous 10 years experience. If I had come directly from Canada, where everyone speaks fluent English, I would have had a much more difficult time adapting to the language difference.
Are there any specific aspects of Filipino communication, such as indirectness or politeness, that you adopt?
My life is pretty simple. I don't need to. I guess if I had aspects of my cultural identity that were in conflict with Filipino cultural identity, then it may be a problem. But maybe my wife would be able to answer that if I asked her, because, she says that I'm often very hard-headed. How do you say that? Matigas ulo?
Matigas ang ulo.
Matigas ulo? Hard-headed. And I think she means by that I'm a bit sometimes stuck in my own ways. And maybe that's true, but I don't have a good example of that. But I suppose that's true. And so, without being able to think of a true example, I think I'm probably still by default or without thinking tend to have an opinion or do things based on my own cultural experience. But when I get reminded that that's not the Filipino way, I will try to adapt.
So thank you, sir.
Okay, you're welcome, po.
No, Sir Gordon, just
Yes.
clarification. And that's the wrap of our interview and our questions for you for today. Thank you so much
Okay.
for sharing your experiences and for your time.